Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Punk Law. And we're back. Episode 3. I'm bringing back on my friend John Rinaldi. And in this episode, we're going to talk about a couple of different things. We're going to talk a little bit about law school. But first, we're getting on right off the bat with talking about, I guess, the Supreme Court had their Zoom experience this week. And as well as the potential ramifications of maybe this new COVID world. What's the efficacy of doing these Zoom meetings maybe as a replacement for town board meetings or planning board meetings or zoning board meetings? And we're even going to give you an alternative to personal injury. That's right, personal injury reform. Remember when people used to complain about that? Well, Walter here has an idea for personal injury reform. So tune in and hang on, and welcome to Punk Law 101. And please understand that this podcast is for informational purposes only, right? This is not legal advice. This is more of a conversation. This is stuff that, you're going to want to hear, but you should definitely do your own research on, maybe retain an attorney for guidance for any of these issues that we may discuss. To talk about the the oral argument streamed on Zoom thing.
So I think that is great because I'm sure you heard about the toilet flush.
No, I did not hear about that.
I think it was Roberts in the middle of questioning, you heard a toilet flush in the background. And it's like, oh my. Wait, what?
Were they doing their oral arguments from their bathroom?
I think what happened was he probably has a setup probably near where there is a bathroom, and someone else in his family was probably there, and you could just kind of catch it on the mic. Because I'm gonna guess that Supreme Court justices are not really into acoustics and setting up a proper studio.
That's true, yeah. Or maybe somebody was on their phone doing the Zoom thing. I don't know. I don't know who it was that they thought they heard it from. So if it was I can imagine they probably did it from a computer. If they're and I don't imagine any of these people were doing it from their phone and they were walking around their apartment or something.
But yeah,
that's hilarious.
Great, I know, but the thing is, he would probably be mortified.
Oh yeah.
So I guess that's a cautionary tale
about these Zoom calls. Make sure you're in a quiet room away from the bathroom.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting concept. I like the oral, because oral arguments, at least for the Supreme Court, are public. They're usually highly reported on, so it's not like anything's going on there that you don't know about. But I'm shocked they never but they never did it with video in the room.
I mean, they don't allow recording in general anyway. So I guess why would they change that now?
It allows for people to, I understand it, to allow people the ability to learn the process and to understand where the court was coming from, and I like the concept of doing it. And I like that it's live. If you could do it live streamed, that's kind of I think there's a benefit to that. People would be more interested in watching it. People would be more interested in listening to it. Maybe not. Maybe it would be the same amount of people tuning in.
I mean, I would. I'd listen to it. I'm not gonna give up going to the bar to listen to a Supreme Court argument. I mean, unless it was a big one, maybe I might make that. But
well, you could have it on at the bar, especially nowadays with how there's no contact.
Okay. Remember, we are lawyers. Most people are not. They're not going to give a fuck.
Well, dude, a couple months from now, man, they're gonna be screaming for content. Everybody's watching TikToks nowadays.
Say that to the people on your other podcast. Yeah, fuck the football game. We're gonna listen to the Supreme Court argue about I don't know something.
We're gonna listen to them argue about copyright infringement and whether or not Google's Scholastic Books thing should be replaced. Is considered fair use. Where they're using excerpts. Yeah, that's although that wasn't taken up to the Supreme Court. That was a shocker. Although that's basically saying they believe in that case.
Well, yeah.
So yeah. By the way, copyright is one of the weirdest areas, I think, as far as federal practice, because it's still affected by where you were practicing because it's a federal court practice. But if you're in like the Second Circuit, you might get one ruling, and if you're in the Seventh Circuit, you're going to get a totally different ruling.
Yeah, that's the thing I think people don't understand about how, like, I feel like maybe a good episode would be the structure of the court system, because it is not intuitive.
It's not. Well, I would say federal court from an away scale, from like the large scale, from how people probably think it works, is intuitive. How it actually works, like the things like what we're talking about with like differences in the Second Circuit
Well,
versus the
yeah,
Seventh
that's what I
Circuit,
mean, is like the like
that's not intuitive.
the structure, and like, because like I've had this happen before where like people will like be like, I don't know why this is such a big deal, this court said it's not a big deal, and like we're in the Third Circuit, and they'll like pull up like a Ninth Circuit opinion.
Yeah,
like, I don't have the time to explain to you why that's not relevant.
it's relevant, but it's not dispositive. You now use it as part of a persuasive argument.
To be perfectly honest with you, the Third Circuit don't give a damn. They do what they please.
Well, there you go. What with that in mind, what was I going to say? Shoot. Yeah, this is what I hate about it, is like I will say this: New Jersey's appellate system probably runs the way people think the appellate system works.
Well, even with the naming convention, because unlike New York, we didn't have to be special.
The Court of Appeals is not our Supreme Court. Who invented that? Yeah, I forgot about that. Who invented the court names here?
I don't know. I fucking hate that. God damn it, New York, you had to be special.
Oh, yeah, New York is weird. New York's weird in general. I don't like elected judges. I don't like the I don't like the whole I don't know. That's another one, though. It's like what goes on in one area of the state's not always going to be the same as another area of the state. Like New Jersey, I think I actually have said this before. I think New Jersey is actually probably one of the best like court systems. And this might be because I've not been in a lot of other ones, but I've been around New York and New Jersey. And New Jersey comes off as way more refined and working, at least functionally.
Perhaps.
And more evenly, what's it called? If you're in the north of the state compared to the south of the state, you might get slight differences, but you're not getting massive differences.
Yeah, Jersey's pretty consistent on these.
Yeah, it's the most I think it's consistent throughout the whole state. Whereas you might be in New York City and you're going to get something totally different than if you were practicing in Orange County, New York.
Oh, I mean, what's like so culturally different? Like, I think people forget that. Like, most of New York is like empty nothingness.
Yes, outside of New York City, it's cold Alabama.
Basically,
that's what it is. It's riding New York City's coattails. You go past the Mario Cuomo Tappan Zee Bridge, because they don't want to hyphenate the name and they wanted to name it after somebody new. But yeah, you go past the Tappan Zee Bridge, it's a whole different animal. Dude, you go to Rockland County, New York. That's a whole different species of like what's going on here. You get like it's like 7 towns, and then there's villages, and then there's like and there's pitchforks, and they're all over the place. Like one town is like Alabama, the other town is like Middle Ireland. You go to one town, it's like the boonies. You go to another town, it's like it's.
I mean, you're telling me, man. We went to college like right on the border.
I forgot we went to Ramapo. We went to both the same college and the same law school. That's the strange thing about this.
I know, right?
How many people did that? How many people went to Ramapo and Rutgers?
There were actually a few more in my year.
Oh, were there? I was the only one. I was the only one who knew about Ramapo at my school. Not knew, but like had gone to it. And I remember they were looking for Rutgers. They were asking us. I think I was taking Civ Pro at the time, as 1L year, and I had Kim. And she had to do a thing to kind of get law students to come to Rutgers. And she's like, what are some of the selling points for Rutgers? And I raised and not the money aspect, not the tuition.
I was going to say it's cheap.
Yeah, that's exactly. Not the money, not the tuition, and I raised my hand and I go, well, there's no bears. And everybody just went like, where the fuck?
I like how that's a joke that like most of them would not get.
Oh no! Everybody in law school thought it was hilarious, but the problem is you can't tell that at an open mic.
Why?
Well, there's no bears. They all started dying. And it's like, you're right, Walter. There's no bears in Newark.
God, I remember getting all those bear alerts at Ralpo, and after by midway through like my sophomore year, I just stopped caring. Like, whatever, there's bears. If I die, I die. Gotta go to class.
Dude, that was the best thing about law school is it was very easy to be the class clown at law school. It was just like, oh my God, you guys take this way too seriously, which you should take it seriously. But dude, the way they set you up for jokes like left and right, that was the best part of law school. And it was just like, that alone, what was it? I was asked by Sklar, who was my property teacher, who I actually know people who went to school in the 80s who had Sklar.
Yeah, same here. I love Sklar, I'm not gonna lie.
I like Sklar. I also had Trachtenberg, I think he retired, I think a year or two after I was done or something. So I was one of the last people who had Trachtenberg for contracts, and he was again another one of the old guard guys there since the 70s. So people went to, like, I had the same contracts, potentially I had the same contracts professor as Elizabeth Warren, who went in 78.
Yeah, I know, right?
And we're talking about I went in 2011. So I just remember Sklar asked me how do I pronounce my last name, and I just went, I don't know. And everybody just to a room full of comedians, that won't hit, but to a room full of lawyers, everybody's dying at this point. What the fuck is wrong with this guy? Don't know his own last name. How did he get into law school? Oh my God. And it's just, I don't know. Meanwhile, you tell the host at an open mic you don't know how to pronounce your last name. They look at you like they don't think it's funny. They just think you're an asshole.
Now, I must say, for the listeners, Professor Sklar sounds like Roz from Monsters, Inc.
You're right. Oh my God.
It's so spot on.
That is exactly. I remember thinking that myself. That's amazing. Because perfect. I don't think anybody else ever said that out loud.
Oh. No, you don't say that out loud.
I'm shocked it never, but that did come through my mind. That's the amazing thing. Amazing property teacher.
My story with Sklar, though, she got me once. So it was someone else's. You know how she's like, it's your day and you're just doing, the thing. And the guy that she had picked for that day, like, clearly did not read.
Yes.
And rather than just admit that he didn't read, he was like floundering. And honestly, the whole class is laughing at him.
So hold on, for clarification purposes, in law school, there's a thing called cold calling, right? It happens like in regular school. It's like when your teacher calls on you, but it's way more popular in law school for some reason, where they're trying to get students to read because that's part of being a lawyer. Is you're supposed to read case law. That's what you're trying to learn how to do. And this is a particular professor who she would cold call, and she would stick on you for most of the class, and then you were pretty much done for like half the semester.
Oh yeah,
you would never cold call on you again.
If you did it right, you only ever had to go once,
maybe twice.
The people who had to go twice were typically the people that didn't follow directions, at least in her class.
Or they were early in the year.
Yeah.
Is the other option.
But but usually if you admit you didn't read, a professor will just let you go. Not Sklar. She does not care.
Nope.
But he was like floundering, and the whole class is kind of like chuckling. But because I sat in the front row, it was very obvious to her that I was there. She looks at me and she goes, "Well, Mr. Rinaldi, if you think it's so funny, why don't you answer the question?" Like, God damn it!
You can't show any kind of emotion. Just like you gotta ignore everything, phase out, and then if you're gonna start cracking up at somebody else losing, oh no, that's a bad move.
I mean, the upside is I had read that day, and I did get through it. But I wasn't like I had
But she
read.
grills you though too. That was one where it's you could have read and you still don't know what the fuck.
Well, that was the thing. I wasn't prepared for it to be my day because it wasn't supposed to be my day for like 2 months.
Well, now it wasn't ever in order from what I remember. It was just that she would call on you at random, but you knew once you did it once.
No, she had a system for. I don't know about you for your year, but for my year, she had a system.
Oh, I maybe I didn't know the system. Maybe I kind of forgot about that there was a system.
So here's what she did, because she told us at the end of the year, or at the end of the semester, I should say. She handed out a survey on day one, and it had like 4 questions. It was like your name, what town are you from, like what do you want to do when you leave here, like the simple basic questions on an index card. She collected them, and the thing was, if you followed directions and you answered all of the questions reasonably, then you were in the good half of the class. And if you didn't listen or didn't answer the questions very well, you were in the miscreant group.
I
And what
don't
happened
remember.
was the miscreants were called first in alphabetical order. And then the good group was called in alphabetical order. And since I knew damn well that I wasn't a miscreant, I knew I wasn't going to get called for a while because my last name begins with an R. So like even worst case scenario, I shouldn't have been called in like the first 3 weeks because like I saw the pattern.
Mm-hmm.
She was calling in alphabetical order, but not perfect alphabetical order.
Yeah.
So I kind of figured out like there has to be something to this. And then later on, it was we were basically divided into like
Maybe it was alphabetical
people
order.
who people who follow directions and people who don't.
Huh. Yeah, again, we're talking about going back quite a while for me now.
Yeah.
And also I've repressed all of 1L year at this point. I don't remember anything of it, except for the fact that I had teachers there, and there were some good teachers and there were some teachers, and they were teachers. That's how it goes. That's law school in general. But generally 1L year is it's a misery. It's a special kind of
It
misery.
wasn't the worst thing ever.
I also went when it was a little bit different though. We've talked about this. It used to be you'd take this class called legal research and writing. And I had a guy named Nardone who used to run the program, and he designed it to make it 10 times more aggravating than anybody ever could have imagined. And then he had rules that every class was supposed to follow. So you couldn't get outside help. You couldn't go to a tutor to help you figure out how to do this, because his reasoning was, I went to law school and people had help writing their essays and I didn't know what to do. So I feel like everybody else should not know what to fucking do. And I was like, this
Well,
is the
that's not a good way to do things.
no. And then it's also weird because his reasoning was is like some people came from families of lawyers, some people had this as their background, and I didn't know anybody. And I'm like, that makes it worse that you can't get a tutor, right?
Yeah.
Like if your argument is you don't want them to go get a tutor, well, I'm also in a class with somebody who worked as a paralegal for 6 years. They
I
had
suffered, therefore you will suffer.
yeah. Also, the fact that somebody's parents might be a lawyer might mean they understand it better because they've already gotten to like they know what a legal brief is. They know what a legal memo is. Whereas if you're a guy who's never touched law in their life and been around it, you might not have any clue. So that was kind of or a person. You don't have to be a guy for this to account for you. You could be any kind of species of animal you want as well, or gender, or creature, or banana.
Whatever you are, it likely applies.
Or whatever you want to identify as. Not to get too far into that. Where were we on this? We were talking about Zoom oral arguments and how governmental
Yes.
meetings and all that. So because I was talking with somebody the other day and they were talking about doing this for planning board meetings, right? And I don't know if you've ever been to a planning board or zoning board meeting in New
I have
Jersey.
not. It sounds incredibly boring.
It's not the worst thing in the world. There are people who actually go for fun who aren't lawyers.
Who are these people and who
People
hurt them?
people who have nothing to do with their lives, and they feel like this is going to affect their property. Maybe they got the notice. Some of them do go because like, you got notified that this particular thing's going to affect your piece of property. And for
Okay,
instance,
that's maybe a little different.
there are people who just go to hang out. Like I have a family member who is on who has to go to all these meetings as well, and because he works in town government. And he was telling me like, yo, we get people who just like hang out there who are like they're town flies. They want to know what's going on in the town, and they want to see what's going to happen with it. So but they're talking about maybe trying to make these into Zoom meetings, especially with the COVID-19 thing. And there's attorneys who practice like land use that don't want it to happen. And their argument is that it might open up to more lawsuits, because if you have somebody who's trying to comment on the meeting that, say they get muted and they don't have the ability to comment on it, then they would sue or whatever, or you have an issue where it all breaks down or it's not functioning. I think the real reason is they don't want a video of these meetings because it's very rudimentary. And to be honest, like, yes, they take recordings of a lot of these meetings, but they're usually audio recordings, and they do the minutes. But here's the real deal. Nobody's listening through those audio recordings, right?
This is true.
So either you have to show up so you can kind of get, and also listen. If you had to listen to one of these audio recordings, you would have no clue what the fuck is going on, because it's all audio. And I don't know if you've ever been to one of these meetings. It's 6 people on a panel, or 8 more, depending on the town you're in and how they set it up for their quorums and everything. So you might have 6, 7, 8, 9 people on a panel. You have the town lawyer, but you would never be able to tell who's saying what. So you might be looking through you might be listening to these and you're like, what the fuck is going on? And nobody would ever listen to it. Meanwhile, if you have it on a Zoom panel, well, now you have the videos popping up. You have the idea to identify who's saying what. And you would have a comparison of like, oh, what did they request? What did they want? That was different. If you're talking about like something like a land use ordinance versus some kind of what's it called? A variance. If you wanted to go if you wanted like an exception to a land use ordinance, you get a variance.
Mm-hmm.
If you were listening to this thing and they did these variances and you're like, well, wait a second, why'd they give a variance to this guy and not that guy? They sound like very similar situations. There might be something where maybe you see it's the same attorney 9 times. Maybe you see that there was maybe a deal or it was talked about off the record or something. So you would have you would have it changed differently. Plus, people who would have to go to those meetings and object now would just be able to do it from their living room.
That'd be great.
Dude, imagine you would now all of a sudden you would have a town that would maybe get like 2 objections for every variance, would get 30,000 of them.
In fairness, that might open you up to some pretty high level trolling.
Oh, dude, yes. Imagine, like, dude, like especially if COVID, like if you have so much lockdown for going on to the future, dude, people would probably just tune in just so they could go ahead and object. It's
Yeah,
like, I don't like that guy Billy. He's a dickhead.
If I were bored enough, be like, no, fuck that new development. We're not doing it because I said so.
Fuck Jimmy and his 2 family. I want to say a single family. I don't care if this is going to help make the town economically more viable. That's it. It would just be it would just be some dude sitting in his apartment complex just being like, I don't want them to do this because I don't like the guy who's doing it. And whereas you'd have to show up to every meeting once a month until it was actually put on the docket. Because here's the thing with some of these meetings, right? You go to the planning board meeting or the zoning board meeting and it's on the minutes, right? It's supposed to be on for that night. I've gone for some of them and it's gotten pushed like 3 months each time. Like it's been like, all right, like it gets pushed to the next meeting, but I've like gone 3 or 4 times and it pushed to the next meeting like 6 times because they might be changing something on the variance. They might be making adjustments. Maybe the engineer can't show up. But
I mean, like, my argument against this is in the same vein, but it's like it's already hard enough to get like new housing built.
Yes.
And like you would just make NIMBYism even worse if I didn't even have to go to the meeting.
Maybe, but you also already have that. The people on those zoning boards and planning boards in a lot of these towns are already kind of policing it.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's not a great argument, but it's like, but do we really want to add more to it?
Oh, absolutely. You would now have people who maybe aren't on the board who don't want this going on in their backyard now sitting there being like, well, what about a parking variance for the extra 2 family in the town? Which, not a parking variance, a parking study, which I've been in there where that happened, where they had people who came in. There was somebody doing a 2 family, and this wasn't any of my things. People came in, there's somebody doing a 2 family, and they wanted to list their objections, and they're like, well, there wasn't a parking study done. And it's like, yeah, okay, it's on a busy road in Edgewater, New Jersey, which is a very, very bad traffic area. But you're talking about the difference between a 1 family to a 2 family. You might not even have a difference in the amount of people occupying that spot. You would just be splitting the revenue. Like you're now increasing the amount of money that can come from it because you can rent it out to 2 different groups of people. So you might not even you might have a single family there, but you might be renting it out to 4 people. Whereas if you have a 2 family there, you might be renting out 2 people here, 2 people there. So you might have the same amount of cars either way. But yeah, I don't know. I have mixed feelings on that. I feel like it would allow for more oversight.
Yeah.
Especially if courts did this.
I mean, I've always kind of felt like courts should live stream a lot of things. Not everything, of course.
Well, maybe even courts, it
Um,
should be more. I think courts more than governmental meetings or planning board meetings, because
yeah,
there
because like,
isn't that risk of somebody kind of interrupting.
well, it's like, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't really care about land use in Edgewater,
Yeah,
like, at all. Even if
I just mean
I
in
don't even care
general,
about
like
land use in Hoboken, where I live.
that's one of the examples. But it's an issue going across the state as far as some of those things. And listen, that's something, that's one of those issues. It might affect more things than that. But yeah, like court systems, like, again, if you have a live stream court, you might actually be able to reduce the amount of people going to, you know, it's a thing in schools where they let them peer in on the courts and kind of sit there and watch.
Well, it's also like a lot of court appearances are a waste of time.
Well, you'd still have to appear in court if you
Well, I
had a
mean, but
court
like
appearance.
there are some court appearances that do not need to be in person. They do not.
Well, they're
um,
starting to do that now, and they're trying to anyway. They're trying to work on
so
that, especially with coronavirus.
specifically, case management conferences for family, they are such a waste. I
Probably.
used to feel so bad billing people an entire day for what amounted to 5 minutes in front of the judge.
Don't tell that to actual, like, to don't tell it to people where that's their bread and butter.
Well, I mean, I'm working for LS&J now. I don't give a shit.
That's what I'm saying.
Not my
But
problem.
you and me agree on that. But that's also what a lot of divorce attorneys bill
But
for. Is
like,
that,
oh,
oh,
I
I get to
know.
go to a case management office.
So it's like, but do you know what a case management conference usually consists of? You go in front of the judge, and the judge is like, "Are there any discovery issues?" And you're like, "No." Have you had a chance to negotiate? We're working on it. All right, let's set some dates. And then the judge just goes, discovery is due by this date. We're going to do the next conference at this date. And, whatever. Like, they just set dates, they give you an order, and you're gone. And, like, you could have done this on the phone.
I agree. Like, actually, you know what?
Like, there's no reason to make me show up.
Yeah, that's actually, I kind of agree with you on that. I think that, and not only that, I mean, lawyers would still bill for it anyway.
And you want to
You would
know,
reduce the amount that you're charging the client.
well, you also want to know, like, how like, I can prove to you it's a waste of time. Like, on multiple occasions, I've gotten my clients excused from showing up to case management conferences because the judge knows there's nothing that's going to happen today. They're not going to take testimony. Really, the only thing they care about is the lawyers dealing with everything. And, like, there's no reason why we can't do it on the phone. Just tell me what the dates are and fax me over an order. There's no reason why it can't be done that way. But that's
I
just
agree.
not the way it's done. I had to show up and wait in the hallway for 4 hours.
And at that point, like, again, on both ends, you're wasting your day. You have to bill the client that, and now it's, New Jersey needs to get on. Every state needs to get on that. That's the thing. It's a lot of states are, some are moving towards more. I think that's maybe one of the bright sides of COVID is that you are getting a push to go ahead and adjust some of these antiquated systems.
I mean, I would be down to, like, work from home 3 days a week permanently. That would be great.
But even like, yeah, like you're saying before with the case conference, I don't know if I think criminal would still have to be in person.
Um, most of it, yes, but still.
I I think there's a value to at least the showing up portion of it being in person. Um,
Okay, but
be,
like, you can do it over video though. Like, I don't know. There's
well, here's the thing. So as a defense attorney, you might look at it and go, "There's a risk that this hurts the defense," right? Because now you're going from it being like, especially when you have to get the cop to show up, right? Like now you're going from a Zoom call with the cop to the cop having to show up. With with drug cases, instead of just, because you should object to the lab report being used as opposed,
okay,
like,
but there's an easy solution to this. You just make it defendant's choice. They have the right to be there in person, or they can opt to do it over the phone. Plain and simple.
and I think the trials would still be in person regardless.
I'm
So
very certain trials should still be in person.
yes, because there's even just that aspect of it being you can't get a script off of, like, like for instance, if I'm doing this like a podcast, or I'm doing a Zoom thing. Like, honestly, you could have a script sitting right in front of you. There's also not that intimidation factor of being in person.
But I mean, like,
But for small things, I guess, I get it. Like
yeah,
pre-settlement
because
conferences
like
and
this is how like the admin stuff is doing it now, where like for administrative courts, they're like, look, you have a right to show up in person and do it, have your hearing the old-fashioned way. But if you want to get it done faster, we'll set up a video call. And it's
and
like it's defend well, not really defendant's, claimant's choice for me, but defendant's choice.
mhm.
If you believe it is advantageous for you, or that it makes no difference and you want to get this done quicker, then sure, you can do it that way. And if you insist, it's your right. If you insist or you want to come in person, it might take us 6 months, but we'll get you in.
Yeah, I guess I would like expedite it a little bit too. I mean, for criminal, you don't want it expedited most of the time. You want it to go as slow as possible, get dragged down, and do like a speedy trial motion, or hopefully they don't have discovery, or hope that the cop forgets that he's actually employed. There are things like that where you're like, I just hope the cop doesn't show up, or I hope the cop doesn't know that he's supposed
I
to
don't
be
know.
here.
Things moving a little faster could put a little more pressure on the prosecutor to be more reasonable.
No, because they'll just ask for an adjournment every time. So
Well, they're not going to get it every time.
well, that's where you do the speedy trial motion. But like, there's things that there's a value to. I don't know. I think showing up in person makes it feel like it's more onerous, right? Like that's part of the speedy trial thing. I mean, there's other aspects of speedy trial than just showing up in person. There's the aspect of like, again, this is hanging over my client's head. This should be dealt with or be out. So,
True. Or I mean, like, you could even do it where, like, if an agreement has been reached, you can just do it over like there's nothing to contest anymore. Settlement has been reached. Let's just get this over with.
I also think like state senate, easy to do this. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. This is so easy to verify, so easy to get it done.
I
There
like
shouldn't,
haven't even thought about state government. Like,
or federal government.
yeah,
Well,
that's
state
never
government
gonna
is
happen.
what? Well,
That's
yeah,
never gonna happen.
forget it. No, but well, I mean, New Jersey. I think everybody's realizing in New Jersey, especially after this COVID thing, that oh wait, we could be doing this way more efficiently. Um, I know somebody who works in town government, city government, who's tried getting their office to be not just virtual, but being able to, everything storage in the cloud, everything stored on a hard drive, and they've dealt with a lot of resistance to it up to this point. And because of coronavirus, there's actually like a real push to digitizing everything again.
Yeah, I mean, I had the same thing at work for me, where like people have been saying for years we should probably have like remote work options just in case something happens. Because like if I need to take half a day to go to the doctor's, I'll still do work if I have access.
It's
Like,
also like a minimal cost thing too. It's just
yeah, like it's not hard to do. It's like it's just making it harder for me to do things if I need to like you're making it so I need to take a full day to do something that only took me like an hour.
also with that in mind, like there's other states that have already started moving towards that. New York's been very big on that, especially things like workers' comp. Their system is very much online, so and very much remote. So I know workers' comp firms that are like you can work from home if you wanted to if you're doing New York work. Whereas New Jersey, because everything's so much built on like a solid file, and because New Jersey's been so resistant to digitizing things, they don't. So they like the old process. The problem is New Jersey's workers' comp system is also very antiquated and inundated with, and they don't have enough workers' comp judges. So that makes it very slow and lethargic.
Hmm.
But maybe that would help with it. But also, I don't know. New Jersey, it's weird because workers' comp, is supposed to be this alternative. Is that, and one of the episodes I want to do is personal injury and how it could be made better a little bit because, and one of the things is
That's a
workers' comp.
topic.
Well, because again, like I wanted to talk a little bit about the McDonald's case eventually because
Oh,
there's so
please.
much, so
There's
much
so
that
much to say here.
well, there's so much disinformation about it too, and the reaction to it was to try to like do tort reform, but it was the wrong direction. It was the wrong thing for tort reform. And really, the right way to do tort reform is a lot like workers' comp, which New Zealand does. There's countries that do this. The problem is it would be a hard way to do it in America right away, but we've done it. We've done it with workers' comp. We've made it just part of a system where
Oh,
you take out
that's
the liability aspect of it. You make a public fund that everybody pays into. You get rid of the, or you just make it part of the insurance companies. Like, I mean, that's also kind of how the insurance companies work now, except you still have liability coverage because they're still addicted to it, and they also have more leeway to deny coverage.
yeah.
So, but that's what workers' comp is. You're taking out the question of liability, and it's just about injury, damages, and causation. And workers' comp is more, has it happened on the job or not as well. But if you change the New Zealand system, or if you changed personal injury entirely to the workers' comp system, it would no longer be about where this all came. It would basically be disability. It would basically be an in between a disability and personal injury. It would just be a different form of it. It basically is what workers' comp is, where you have a doctor come in. It's not a lot of, testimony. You don't have to worry about getting 17 different witnesses and corroborating evidence. It's, you're not asking about whether or not there's liability, which, again, liability is a big, argument in a lot of, you're also not arguing duty anymore. I guess you kind of do in workers' comp because you're arguing if they're.
It depends heavily on the facts.
Yeah. But that's kind of like an eventual thing I want to talk about, because, again, everybody wanted to move towards this change of personal injury and tort reform and things like that. And I felt like the direction they wanted to do was cap things. They want to put limits on it. And actually there's a new rule for there's some new stuff coming out with medical malpractice and things like that right now. But, and how that even affects people. But yeah, that was I don't know. Any last thoughts on some of these topics?
No, I think we were pretty thorough. Nothing comes to mind.
And this might get like added on as kind of like an after punk law thing. Like, we kind of go into
sure.
This will be like a second episode that tags on to this.
The magic of editing.
Yes, that is the beauty of it. As I continue to do these little podcast things and video things, I'll do an outro with you right here, and then if you want to talk for another 5 minutes or so, it doesn't. Yeah. But thanks again for coming on, John. It was great having you. Again, we'll get you back on. And everybody's John Rinaldi. Do you have anything that you want them to follow you on? Twitch, Twitter, Instagram?
No, because I learned from a very young age, on the internet, keep your head down.
And yet here I am doing a podcast, internet with, I have every freaking social media thing. I think I have a TikTok. I don't use the TikTok, but I have a TikTok somewhere.
I mean, I have social media. If they want to like look me up by name, you're more than welcome to. I mean, I'm going to be like, who are these people? But whatever.
Yeah, man. But it was great. This was interesting. Both of all these topics are very interesting. And then also people getting an insight into law school, I think, is helpful. Talking about property law and cold calling.
And then they won't make the horrible mistake that we did.
That's it. Yeah, maybe we should do that one day. Is talk about the whether or not you should go to law school and what law school really is like.
Law school regrets. I have many.
Oh my God! I was so ill-informed. Everybody I know was ill-informed.
I was gonna say, I think we all were. To be fair, I don't think any of us knew what we really signed up for.
Well, because you're told to go, and like your family thinks that's what's the funniest. One of the funniest things that I think everybody's always said to me is when I tell them I'm a lawyer, like especially when I first passed the bar, like for the first 2 years, I tell them and they go, it's changed over the years, but for the first 2 years it was, wow, your parents must be so proud. Which is you don't say that about anything. I just bought a car. Wow, your parents must be so proud. I work at Wendy's. Your parents must be so proud. In fact, at that point, it's a backhanded compliment.
For me, law school was simultaneously easier and harder than I thought.
I agree. That's kind of how it's like the flavors of like law school. It was a very, I don't know, like it was kind of, again, Thanks again for John for giving us your time, lending it to us here on Punk Law 101. Again, I know he said he has social media. If you want, you could seek him out. It was a very intriguing interview. If you want, you can follow the podcast at Punk Law 101 on Twitter, on Instagram. You can follow me at BROJO. Death is in the end of life. Punch, like a delicious drink you drink in the summer, which is coming quickly. And tune in, take care, subscribe. Like I said last week, we're gonna have more episodes. I'm also gonna have on more guests, people. I can't do it right now only because I had an issue technologically speaking, but we should be back up fully and running with guests next week. Take care, have fun, bye bye.